In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a basic modular set for games. So, the first thing you need to keep in mind is the units that you're working in. So I'm going to go Unit Setup and System Unit Setup. So you can see here 1 unit equals 1 centimeter. So I'm going to say OK. I'm going to keep it at generic units and click OK. The next thing that's incredibly helpful is setting your grid. So in Max, to set the grid, you just right click here on the snaps, and then you go over to Home Grid, and you can see I have my grid spacing set to 100 units. So I'm going to close that, right? Which means one of these is 100 units. So 100 units equals 1 meter. And so for our basic modular set, we're going to create a 4-meter corridor. So here with perspective active, I'm going to go into keyboard entry and enter 400 by 400 by 400 and hit create. I now have a box sitting out there in the world. I'm going to go to modify. I'm going to name that straight. I'm going to right click on it, convert it to an edit poly. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to activate my FFD 2x2x2. I'm using modifier sets. Configure modifier sets. You go through and enter, find the modifier you want, double click, and it gets added to your list here. And then you just click and say show buttons. It's easy to set up. Otherwise, you could just select these modifiers that are here from the drop-down menu. So I'm going to go into control points, and I want to move all of my model, which is centered. I want to move it so it sits over in positive Y and positive X space. So let's grab these points. I'm going to go into move mode and set this to 400, so it's all the way at the top. I'm going to region select and move this over 400 to the side, and grab these at the bottom and move them up to 0. I'm going to grab the side and move that over to 0. So now my box sits entirely in that positive space. Okay, so now let's convert to edit poly to lock that in. I'm going to go to display, and I'm going to find display properties. I'm going to turn on backface cull, and then go back to modify. And then here in edit poly, turn on element, click on my model, and click flip. So now we're looking at it inside out because this is a hallway that we're making. So here in the front, I'm going to switch to select and just click on that front polygon and delete. And then click on this one as well. That's the back side of our hallway. We're going to delete that as well. So now we could select our FFD 2x2 again. And we'll select our control points. And I'm going to turn on absolute transform. And here on the front, I'm going to lower these down Y by -20. You know what? I want it down 40 actually, so I'm going to load another -20. And then here on the side, I'm going to bring this over 40. And then on the opposite side, I'm going to bring it in -40. Now I'm making those changes in the front, so if you see here on the top that the front end still rests, if I turn off my absolute, the front end still rests at 0, and the back still rests at 400. So now if I was to use this as a modular hallway and clone it out there, you could see that I could build a series of corridors going straight. Now I'm going to want to have more pieces than just those, and so what I'm going to need to do, let's collapse 2 and make this permanent. In order to make the rest of my modular sets, what I'm going to do is just right click on my model and say clone, reference. I'm going to give it a name, corner, and say OK. Now I have a reference clone. That means everything underneath this dark gray bar is instanced. Everything above it, such as the symmetry, is unique. So I click on the mirror plane. I'm going to switch to rotate. My angle snap is already turned on. And so I'm just going to rotate this 45 degrees. You'll see that I now have, if I hide unselected, Control R to orbit, you see I now have a corner piece. So I can just right click, and I'm going to copy that symmetry. We'll hide this guy, and I'm going to unhide by name my straight piece. I'm going to clone him again, and this would be my cap, because I'm going to make a dead end next. And so I'm going to paste that symmetry in there. So now I have my corner. If I right click and hide unselected, okay, there's the cap. Now I'm going to put one more symmetry on, and I'm going to go into the sub object to the mirror plane here and go to move. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this. I want it to sit halfway. So if I'm working in a 1, 2, 3, 400 meter grid, halfway would be 200. And so now I have a dead end. So I'm going to select both of these symmetries and copy both of them and hide this guy. Unhide by name. I'm going to unhide my straight again. And I'm going to clone them. And this is going to be my three-way intersection. Again, it's a reference, and I'm making a reference clone of the straight. And now if I paste, all I need to do is here on this top symmetry, if I just flip it, I now have a three-way intersection. You go to the right or to the left. So I'll copy both those and hide that guy. Once again, going back to the straight, I'm going to clone them as a reference. This will be the four-way. And once again, right-click, paste to get those changes. And now I just need to add one more symmetry. And this one, I need to change the mirror axis. It's going to be along the y-axis. And in the same way that to make our T intersection went halfway, we need to go halfway up. And so you see here, that's along the y-axis. So with that sub-object, I change this to 200. If I hide unselected, we see that this just gives us a straight go in the other direction. Now we don't need that because we can rotate our pieces. But if we simply come over and click flip, we now have our four-way intersection. So at this point, we have a basic modular set. Now the reason we build the way that we did, and by that I mean by using instance referencing, it allows us to be able to go back into our main primary piece, the straight piece, and we can make changes to it, changes that get propagated out to all the other pieces. So if I grab the side edges here, I can connect them together. Maybe pinch them a little bit. And what I'm doing is I'm just making it look like it has a simple amount of molding on the sides. Now, we can make changes as long as those changes don't go out this 400 by 400 volume on the sides. So if I extrude this by local normal, I'm going to extrude them in and say OK. Now I have my basic piece. It's got a little bit more geometry happening. You can see that change is happening to all of them. I hit F4 to show my edged faces. One thing you'll want to note is if I move this guy up, I'll set him to 400. You can see that right now I have co-planar faces if I move them up because there's this geometry that's on the very end. So let's delete that clone I made up there. And now in this guy, I need to delete the faces that were made by the extrude. So we'll get rid of those. That kind of cleans them up a little bit. Maybe I'll make one more change. I'm just going to grab the edges on my sides here, and I'll chamfer those. Maybe like a 2, and hit OK. So now I have my modular pieces. Maybe one last step would be to go into Element and Auto Smooth. And so now I have my basic modular pieces constructed. And there's certainly a lot more that I could do to change them, but for your first pass to kind of test it out and get the process done, I think that this would be more than enough. To do anything else, you're going to really want to have good reference. Now, before I export these to bring them into the game engine, I want to select all of them and just zero out their position in the world. All right. Because when we bring them into our game engine, whether it's Unreal, Unity, or a proprietary engine, they will be relative to their origin in the world. So we'll keep them as instances as reference clones for a while, so that if we keep making changes, like if we, in the following tutorials, UV unwrap them or build light maps for them, make material assignments, that change that happens to the primary one will happen to all the others. So that's it.